In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common questions that EY ask in their interviews, and I'm going to help you plan fantastic answers that are going to get EY really interested in hiring you. So let's start with a question that comes up very regularly in EY interviews, and that's a question around your strengths and weaknesses. And this question can often be answered very badly. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to successfully survive this question. So when you're talking about the strengths, you need to do 3 things. You need to start by picking a genuine strength. It has to be a strength that you definitely possess and that is of some substance. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to make sure that that strength is well evidenced. It's not good enough just to come up with a strength and talk about why you feel that you have this strength. You want to actually supply some sort of evidence that someone else in the world agrees with you that this is a strength. So that could be through a reference or through a qualification. So you want to focus your strength around something that you can back up with solid evidence. The next thing you're going to make sure is that the strength has to be highly relevant to EY's business. You have to do the work for them and show them that the strength is highly relevant and that the fact you have this really strong, well-evidenced strength is actually going to make a difference to their business. So there's a way to structure your answer, which is to say one of my greatest strengths is that I'm an extremely well-organized person. So there's a good example of a strength that would be really useful. You could talk about financial literacy as well. You can talk about lots of other strengths. Well organized is one good example. And then the thing that makes your answer even more powerful is when you bring some evidence. So one way to evidence something could be to say, if you refer to the reference from my manager at my placement who said that. So if you got a reference from someone, that is someone credible, someone in a management position at a similar firm that backs you up and says, this is really your strength. That is extremely powerful and helps you score very highly. Then you do some work for them and you explain exactly how your strength contributes to EY's business. And if you do that, that helps you push up the scoring. Some ideas of things that you might use as your strength. So financial literacy, if you're applying particularly for accounting or audit, so that knowledge of finance and accounting is extremely useful. Having some accounting experience in any business area of EY is going to be really useful because the ability to read accounts is absolutely fundamental to success in business and understanding the operations of businesses. EY particularly is very heavily focused on entrepreneurship. That's why they sponsor the Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And you can also talk about teamwork because huge audits, for example, of massive multinational banking corporations are not done by one single person. There is immense amounts of teamwork that go on in all the big accounting companies. So being a great team player is a really good strength, something that they are looking out for. So on the other hand, we've got your greatest weakness. And this is a question that can blow up an interview. So you want to be very careful in how you choose your interview weakness and make sure that you plan it out. So you have to start by using something that is a real weakness. So saying something like, I'm too much of a perfectionist, that is not an acceptable weakness. Being a perfectionist is kind of a positive, slightly a negative, but it really shows a failure to be reflective. Then you have to talk about the fact that you're proactively doing something about it. It's not good enough just to talk about your weakness. You have to actually say you're doing something about it. So that could be taking an online course, getting some mentoring, or changing the way that you do things to overcome that weakness. But most importantly, you want to try and make it something that EY doesn't really care about or something that you're going to fix such so that it's not actually an issue. So if you were to say something like, I've always hated maths and never really got it. Well, if you're applying to a big 4 accounting firm and you hate maths, well, that's going to be a massive problem. So definitely don't use that as your weakness. Some ideas, you could talk about spelling because everyone's got spell check nowadays and you can quite easily explain away that as a weakness. And you can talk about doing some online course or taking some lessons and basically getting rid of that. Delegation is a good one to use at a very low entry level position where you're not actually expected to do any delegation. So your weakness is something you don't have to do. And then you can talk about how in the future you're going to work on that. And by the time that you'll be expected to delegate, you'll have overcome that. Taking on too much. So learning how to say no can be a good one. So being enthusiastic is a positive. Taking on too much can be a problem. So it's about showing that awareness. Work-life balance initially at big 4 accounting firms isn't very good. So you can talk about how your work-life balance hasn't been as good as you'd like in the past, but you're taking steps to work smarter and be more efficient. So you can talk about how you were inefficient in the past and the changes that you've made to make you more efficient that have freed up some time that's going to help your work-life balance. So if you stick to the strategies that I've given you here, you're going to survive the strengths and weaknesses question, because often these are used as a negative screening tool to screen out people that are giving the wrong answers. So let's look at how you structure your answer, which is to say, one of the weaknesses I'm aware of is explain what your weaknesses are, and then simply say, I've been working on this by, and explain what you've been doing. And that structure successfully addresses all these points and helps you survive this question. So let's look at the problematic team question. And I want to make this fairly general. Generally, they ask about conflict in teams, but they could ask it in any number of ways. So we're looking at how do you answer questions about when things go wrong in teams, particularly with regard to conflict. So you could start by talking about a genuine conflict or a genuine problem that you've encountered in a team. It has to be something that is a significant problem. Otherwise, it's just a bad example because there's nothing to take from it. Then you have to make sure that it's been professionally managed. You have to have behaved very professionally and put your best self forward in this. But the number one most important thing when you're thinking about a team working experience where something's gone wrong is that it must have a positive outcome. They don't want to employ people who take part in or lead projects that fail. Why would that be a positive? Why would you ever use an example of a failed team working? So it might have been, very difficult and challenging and a winding road with lots of roadblocks, but fundamentally you got the outcome. So you met the intended outcomes. That is the most important thing. Some things that you absolutely have to avoid is any sort of disastrous conflict or any problem that is an absolute enormous disaster, something really, really bad, really negative. Anything where you behaved unprofessionally, you want to avoid. You do not bring up any unprofessional conduct at all in an interview, because the only thing that can do is lower your score. And if you use an example with a negative outcome, your score will just go down so fast. EY are not interested in people that lead failures. So make sure that it's absolutely an example with a positive outcome. So the way that you actually structure your answer is with the STAR technique. And you'll use this many, many times in the interview. And it's a great way of focusing in on the right things. So you start with a situation. So tell them what went wrong. What was the conflict? What was the problem in the team? But don't tell them too much. Don't go on and on about the problem. Just basically state it in 1 to 2 sentences. You want to be really snappy on this one. Then explain what the task is. Show them what success looked like so that later in the question, you can circle back to this and explain how you were successful. Then talk about the actions that you took. You have to show some leadership here. How did you fix it? How did you intervene to fix the problem that you had in the team? And then talk about the results that you got. And the trick here is to make sure the result matches up exactly with the task. So show the success and then tell them how your actions contributed to that success. And so I'll go on and tell you about some things to consider to score highly. So certain points you want to hit and certain success criteria that show that you've hit that. So they want people that are solutions focused. EY is all about solving problems rather than being bogged down by problems. So you want to show that you are a solutions focused person. So you talk about how you're fixing the problem rather than going on about what the problem is. Don't blame anyone and never say anything negative or insulting about anyone you work with. Show that you've got high standards, that you expect everyone to contribute, you expect success, you expect everyone to work hard. You have high standards for yourself and for others. Show also that you're supportive, that you're compassionate, that you understand your team members' perspective, that you listen to other people, and that you work cooperatively with them, and that sometimes you're willing to step in, do a little bit extra to help someone out, and that there's a feeling of, mutual respect and everybody helps each other out. Show that you get the best out of people so that you're good at motivating people and that you're really in there making sure that everyone's performing at their best. And make sure also that you hit the end point and that you successfully delivered on the task despite any conflict or any problems that came up. And if you follow this system, you're going to score really highly because you're meeting all of the criteria that is used to score it. So, really important question now. Why do you want to join EY? And if you have not prepared for this question, you are not going to get the job. This is a make or break question. You need to really have written out 2 to 3 paragraphs that you have rehearsed, because this question is going to come up and it is going to determine to a large extent success or failure. It is one of the most important questions in the entire interview. So I'm going to take you through some things that you're going to have to include. So think about what makes EY special. So compare it to the competitors and talk about why you're choosing this firm over the other firms and what you really love about EY. A great way to structure your answer is to do some research on a project, because you can show off some knowledge, you can show off some research, and take that as a case study and explain the specific parts of that is really interesting and why you would be really fascinated and really interested in working in a project like that. Definitely explain in detail how your personal interests match up with your work, because if you can show that your personal interests and what you're really interested in academically and professionally is exactly what EY's business is, then that's a really great positive. Also talk about the training that EY offers. Look on LinkedIn, look at what people at EY have achieved with the firm, and talk about why that is such a big attraction to you. So you're committed to continuing professional development, and also make sure that you're highly enthusiastic. When you're saying your answer, show some enthusiasm. And if you've planned it really well and you know exactly what you're saying, you could be focusing more on that enthusiasm than actually thinking about what you're going to say. There are some things that you must avoid. So saying that you live near their office is a really big problem in the interview. It shows that maybe you're not applying for the right reasons. That's a real negative. Don't talk about salaries or the enormous and absurd amounts that partners at Big Four firms get. You're not at the stage where you should be talking about salary. That is only after you've been offered the job. Any idea that you're not really committed to the firm, so talking about getting chartered status and then starting your own business, for example, maybe that's what you want to do, but now is not the time to be talking about leaving. You're not talking about leaving the firm before you've even got a job there. And really, if you're saying anything that doesn't do anything to improve EY's business, you're wasting their time. So make sure you stick to those sort of things and you'll be successful. The next thing you're going to have to make sure you do is make sure you have really, really done your research on the firm. And even if they don't ask you directly what you know about EY, there's going to be loads of opportunities throughout the interview to drop in your knowledge. And at any opportunity, show off all the knowledge that you've done. People who have done lots of research come across a lot better than people who haven't. So the way that you structure your answer and think about this is you must know everything that everyone knows about the firm. If you were asked people randomly on the street, you need to know at least as much as what they do. So you need to know, of course, that it's an assurance and it's got actuary businesses. It's Fortune 500 company. It does advisory. It's a Big Four. It's involved in M&A consulting. And it's a partnership. All those things are obvious. You should definitely know those fundamental facts. Then you need to go up one level and talk about some things that only some people would know. So knowing about the Entrepreneur of the Year award, knowing some of the unique points, their profit and turnover, these basic facts, like their main office as well. Just knowing that shows that you've actually done a bit of research. But then to really stand out, you have to know some things that only very few people would know. So you know specific case studies. You know that they invented management consulting, which is a real big claim to fame. You know that the oldest parts of the firm dated from 1849. You know all these things about the history, and you've really done your research. And also make sure that you look up EY's annual report and you read it, because in the annual report you will find better information than anywhere else. And simply mentioning in the interview that you have actually taken the time to read the firm's annual report is a really great positive. So I've given you some ideas on how to prepare. You absolutely must do loads of research. This is a great starting point, but you need to read that annual report. So moving on to the last question before we see some questions that you can ask them is, how do you manage multiple conflicting tasks at once? So when you're working in a Big Four or EY, you're going to have lots of different deadlines and lots of different tasks all at the same time. And you're going to have some system of managing that. So the first thing you mention is you talk about a planning system. So that's, you got short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. You anticipate the pinch points, you anticipate the times where you're busy and plan around those. So you know how your short-term goals are contributing to your long-term goals, and you know what you can put on the back burner and what's got to be focused on now. And you can talk about tools like Gantt charts, for example, as a way of tracking it. Great phrase to use is working smarter, not harder. So if you've got programming or Excel experience, that often means that you can do the same amount of work, but a lot faster because you've got all these skills that automate things. So automation is a great thing to mention. You want to talk about the way that you structure things with really the client in mind. Your focus is what's going to make EY's business successful and what's going to have the most impact and the most positive impact on our clients. And then you're going to talk about just having some raw determination and just some grit, that you work hard, that you work really, really hard. You don't waste any time at work and you get lots of stuff done. And if you get all those ideas in, you're going to satisfy them that you know how to manage your workload. So let's finish up on a bonus of some great things to ask at the end of the interview. So definitely ask about the next steps in the hiring process. Ask them what a great employee of EY looks like. And by doing that, they're going to list all the things that they're looking for, and you can politely and subtly remind them and engage in a conversation about how you meet their requirements and their vision for a great employee. Ask them why they chose this firm. Why did they pick this one and not another big four? And then you can join in and agree with them and take their reasons for wanting to choose EY and integrate that in your reasons to join. Definitely ask, for example, if you're a new graduate or if you're new to the industry, ask what you can do to be super prepared. What should you read? What would you recommend that I look up or learn before I start so I can start day one being really effective? And lastly, make sure the one question that you ask is based on something that's come up in the interview. So hopefully this video has been very helpful to you. Best of luck in your EY interview, and thank you very much for watching.